The fight over the president's border wall taking new shape at this hour as the Trump administration threatens California's bullet train project in two major fronts. First, targeting nearly $1 billion in federal funds, and second, trying to reclaim $2.5 billion. Governor Newsom calling it political retribution.
From Sacramento back to the White House now. Here's the president on that. Quote, the failed fast train project in California, where the cost overruns are becoming world record-setting, is hundreds of times more expensive than the desperately needed wall. Jeff Paul picks up the story. He's live in L.A. today. Jeff, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Yeah, the Transportation Department says it's looking into its legal options to take back that $2.5 billion in federal funds that California has already spent. And the timing of this is in question because it was just announced just a day after California filed a lawsuit challenging President Trump's emergency declaration at the border. Now, this all surrounds a $77 billion project that would create a bullet train from L.A. to San Francisco. Governor Gavin Newsom firing back through a statement, quote, it's no coincidence that the administration's threat comes 24 hours after California led 16 states in challenging the president's farcical national emergency. It's a clear political retribution by President Trump, and we won't sit idly by. This is California's money, and we are going to fight for it. Governor Newsom also addressed the topic during the recent State of the State address.
Abandoning the high-speed rail entirely means we will have wasted billions and billions of dollars. And with all due respect, I have no interest in sending back $3.5 billion of federal funding that was allocated to this project to President Donald Trump.
Now, during that address, Governor Newsom said he wanted to scale back the rail project, which is over budget. He says they're not killing it, but looking at other ways at financing the project.
It's a very interesting development to follow with Jeff Paul. Thank you, sir. Live in Southern California today. 3 minutes past. Sandra?
Now to the latest twist in the Jussie Smollett case. Investigators still waiting to have a follow-up conversation with the actor as prosecutors question the two brothers who had been possible suspects. The state's attorney recusing herself from the case. And now there are new questions about a racist letter that Smollett received a week before the alleged attack. Matt Finn is keeping track of it all for us live in Chicago this morning. Matt, what's the latest?
Well, Sandra, this morning, Jussie Smollett's crisis manager tells us that Jussie decided not to meet with police on Monday and then again on yesterday, on Tuesday. And Chicago police have acknowledged to us that they can present this case to prosecutors or a grand jury to seek a warrant or a subpoena. And it's becoming more apparent that Chicago police are now trying to get portions of this case in front of a grand jury. Fox News has learned that the Osendaro brothers were set to have their testimony locked in before a grand jury, but Smollett's legal team presented some type of information that halted the process. Smollett's attorneys maintain that Smollett had nothing to do with the attack. Now, documents obtained by Fox News now reveal that Smollett was convicted of a 2007 DUI and giving Los Angeles police false information. And also on Tuesday yesterday, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx recused herself from this case. A statement says she might personally know some of the witnesses. And police will also tell Fox News that they investigated a tip yesterday from one of Smollett's neighbors inside his high-rise that claimed they saw Smollett with the Osendaro brothers the night of the attack, but police now say that that tip was inaccurate. Sandra.
So, Matt, what other charges does the actor potentially face?
Well, Smollett could be in trouble with the FBI because the FBI is investigating that alleged death threat letter that he received a week prior to this attack. It had a MAGA return address, and now we're told that if he lied to the FBI about that, he could be facing some federal charges. CBS News reports that Smollett played a part in sending that threatening letter to himself, and when it didn't garner enough attention, he carried out this alleged attack. Those claims Smollett denies. Sandra.
Matt Finn in Chicago for us. Matt, thanks.
Did you believe he was actually an agent for Russia?
We believe that could be possible, and that's why we opened those cases.
How possible?
Well, you know, Joy, the FBI doesn't open cases because we like a person or we don't like a person. We don't open cases because we are political in one direction or another. We open cases because we look at the information we have in our hands at the time. Yeah. And if that information gives us a credible, articulable basis to believe that a threat to national security exists or that a federal crime may have been committed, It is our obligation under those circumstances to open a case.
A really interesting segment there. Andrew McCabe's still talking a lot and just about everywhere. Sean Spicer, senior advisor and spokesman for the Super PAC America First Action, former White House press secretary. Sean, how you doing?
Good morning, Bill.
You've been watching him speak everywhere. What do you think we're learning from him now, Sean?
We're learning that he wants to sell books. This is the Comey playbook. You get fired, you write a book, you make up salacious allegations, and you do a massive media tour. It's no surprise, but I think we've got to remember who Andrew McCabe is. Investigators felt as though he misled them. They said, quote, the Inspector General said, quote, he lacked candor with them. And so this is a gentleman who has a history of misleading investigators, of not being straightforward. And so now he's doing everything he can to sell as many books as he can and make as much money. But the reality is this is a guy who is dismissed by the Inspector General because he lacked candor and he misled them. So, I think the viewers, wherever he is, have to keep in context who this individual is and the playbook that he's following.
So he did NBC yesterday morning. He did CNN last night. It was MSNBC this morning. But I want to go back to The View and pick up on this exchange that got a lot of attention. This is Meghan McCain with a very specific question. Watch here.
Were you ever a leaker to the New York Times?
Absolutely not. No, not in any time ever. You should understand, Meghan, when I was serving as deputy director, I was one of 2 people in the FBI that had the authority to disclose information to the media. That is an FBI policy.
Why did James Comey deny the claim that he approved your leaks to the press?
I don't know why Jim Comey doesn't remember the conversations that we had in the same way that I do.
Well, who knew? I mean, The View's coming down hard there, Sean.
Yeah, that's a first.
Of all places.
But exactly. But the thing that's interesting about that exchange is the nuance. He says he didn't leak, but then he goes on to explain why he was authorized to disclose and talk to the media, meaning that in his mind, he doesn't view what he said as a leak because he was authorized to do it under the way that the FBI is structured in terms of who can talk to the media. So he's not denying that he talked to them. What he's saying is he didn't leak to them. And that's a very interesting nuance.
Okay. We'll see where that goes. You follow this story with the Covington Catholic, right? Where the Washington Post got a $250 million lawsuit. I just want to read a couple excerpts from the lawsuit that we picked up so far. Number 1, here we go. The Post engaged in a modern-day form of McCarthyism to claim leadership of a mainstream and social media mob of bullies which attacked, vilified, and threatened Nicholas Sandmann. Here's another one. The Post ignored basic journalistic standards because it wanted to advance its well-known and easily documented biased agenda against President Donald J. Trump. What do you think this is teaching us, Sean? What do you think of the suit that's been filed on behalf of Lynn Wood?
Well, I hope that he wins, and I hope that this is just the first of several to come. This is a teenager who was accused of these heinous things, and as they said in that lawsuit, basic journalistic standards weren't followed. From now on, every Google search will follow him wherever he goes, and many of the other students that went to Covington, because the Post and countless other media institutions didn't do the basics. For all of these institutions that decry fake news and attacks on the media, here is example number 1 why people have lost faith in the media. They continue to perpetuate stories as long as they further the narrative that anybody that's a conservative or that supports Trump should be convicted and condemned. That was their crime. That they wore a MAGA hat, that they wore a Make America Great hat. That was what the Post realized. Once they saw that hat, then he was guilty. He needed to be convicted and condemned, and they went all in after him. A 16-year-old kid is now tarnished forever because they've not only failed, it's not that they failed to follow journalistic principles. They didn't want to do it because they wanted to make sure that they got this kid.
Well, in this case, perhaps you have a point there. But all media is not bad. And it was your job to stand up for the president in your position, but also to be fair to the reporters who were covering him. And then we got this tweet about 30 minutes ago from the White House. West Wing, the New York Times reporting is false. They are a true enemy of the people. That's from the president yet again.
Well, I've made very clear during my time and since I've left the White House that I don't paint the press with a broad brush. I think there are some good reporters and there are some bad ones. But, you know, it took CBS's Lara Logan the other day to call it out and say that all of these institutions, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CBS, NBC, ABC, all of them have a disposition on the left. And their problem is that they won't admit their own bias. And in particular, with this particular president, there is an absolute personal venom and hatred and vitriol because they don't like him and they don't like the interactions that they have with him. They've made it very personal. And in so many cases, they've stopped being objective and have made it a personal crusade to go after him. Oh. But the reality is that they can't claim to be objective. There are some really good reporters in that press room, and there are some really good people out there reporting. But by and large, most of them are left-leaning and have made it a cause celeb to go after this president.
Sean, thanks for your time. There's a lot more to come up on this, too, and we know the president gave an interview to the New York Times recently, so we're following that. Thank you, Sean. It's good to have you back on our program here today as we watch this. Sean Spice there live. Lynn Wood is the attorney for Nick Salmon, as I mentioned. He's going to be a guest of our program tomorrow. See, this Washington Post was the first shot fired. They have a long list, dozens and dozens of other media outlets and a lot of celebrities, too, that they feel we're in the wrong, so they will make their legal case, Sandra, soon.
Well, the news is flowing fast this morning. Still a lot more to get to this hour. President Trump predicting he will win re-election.
You got a lot of people running, but only one person's going to win. I hope you know who that person is.
The president also sending a message to Bernie Sanders saying, quote, he missed his chance. RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel is on deck. She joins us live next.
Also, some breaking news on two of the women who fled their countries become brides of ISIS fighters, how the U.S. and the U.K. are responding, and how at least two want to come back here, home.
Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin issuing a new warning to the U.S. John James is under consideration to replace Nikki Haley as our ambassador to the UN. He will join us with his reaction in moments.
I'm somebody who represents more than just my race. I'm somebody who represents the United States of America, who's a combat veteran and is willing to defend this nation and keeping this country first and making sure we advocate.
He would become second in command to Attorney General William Barr, replacing Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein, who's expected to leave the Justice Department in mid-March.
Bernie Sanders is running, yeah, that's right. Personally, I think he missed his time. It'll be interesting to see how he does. I think what happened to Bernie maybe was not so nice. I think he was taken advantage of. He ran great 4 years ago. You got a lot of people running, but only one person's going to win. I hope you know who that person is.
Immediate reaction now. Bernie Sanders is in the race. The president commenting just yesterday from the Oval Office. A bit early this morning, here's the tweet. Crazy Bernie has just entered the race. I wish him well. What about this development? Ronna McDaniel, RNC Chairwoman. How you doing, Ronna? And good morning to you. I see you're back in Washington, D.C., where the snow is coming down. He said he may have missed his time, but Bernie Sanders is saying he raised $4 million in 12 hours. That's pretty good, Ronna.
That is a good haul. It's significantly more than Kamala Harris raised in her first day of her announcement. Bernie Sanders is going to force Democrats to lurch further to the left, further to the progressive socialist side of the Democrat Party. You're already seeing candidates trying to out-Bernie, and the American people have to look at these radical ideas they're proposing and what it will do to our economy versus the results of this administration with wages up, jobs coming back, GDP up. Our country is doing phenomenally well. Why would we want to change that?
Well, privately, do you hope Bernie Sanders does well?
No, I think they're all terrible. I like the more in. I want a long, drawn-out primary. I want this to go well into the summer of 2020 so that it takes them a long time to pick their candidate. And I know President Trump's going to win. I mean, look at what he's done for this country and look at what they're offering. It's frightening what the Democrats are putting forward.
Let me go back to more Bernie Sanders from yesterday. On his announcement, he said the following, Ronald. Watch here.
The only way we will win this election and create a government and an economy that works for all is with a grassroots movement, the likes of which has never been seen in American history. They may have the money and the power. We have the people. That is why we need 1 million Americans who will commit themselves to this campaign.
We're going to get a lot more reaction on this. The president made the comment that he believes he's won the debate already because you mentioned that he's dragged more to the left, and we'll see where that debate goes. And you may get your wish in a long, drawn-out primary. We'll see with all the contenders. Here is Joe Biden in Philadelphia yesterday. Watch and listen to this comment.
If you take a look at what the hysteria going on now about the southern border, there's a simple reason, folks, why it's in our interest to deal with that. And what's the best way to deal with that? Well, this president came along and essentially let it all blow up. It's about xenophobia. This is not healthy.
Well, he went there, Rana.
Well, we know what the Democrats are going to do. They are using identity politics. They want to divide this nation. They're continuing to rip our nation apart. Joe Biden didn't think it was xenophobia when he voted in 2006 for the Secure Fence Act. Many Democrats have supported securing our southern border. It was rational, reasonable policy under President Obama, but suddenly when President Trump puts it forward, they use this language. It is inflammatory. It is divisive. The president is focusing on making our country stronger and safer, and they want to continue to divide. And I hope the American people reject the Democrats' policy of division and running on division.
We're going to have a long time to talk about this. I think you know that. Ronna McDaniel, hope you come back.
Thank you.
Thank you. From Washington, D.C. today.
Well, the search continues for a new UN ambassador to replace Nikki Haley. We're learning former Senate. Russian President Vladimir Putin issuing a strong warning for the United States, saying he is open to arms control talks with President Trump, but is also fully prepared to protect his own nation. Joining us now is John James, former GOP Senate candidate and said to be a leading contender to replace Nikki Haley as our ambassador to the UN. John James, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And welcome back to the program. So do you have anything to tell us this morning?
Well, it's an honor to be considered for the U.S. UN mission. I believe that having somebody with a business background who understands how to bring lean management approach, reforms and business practices to make the UN run better, also a combat veteran who understands the consequences of war, also someone who understands the growing spheres of communist influence around the world, and having somebody who could advocate for America's priorities and have American leadership, I think is absolutely important.
Sounds
it's
like
an
you
honor
want
to be
the job.
considered, and I'm looking forward to getting the call should it come.
All right. Sounds like you want the job.
Of course I do. I have a passion for service. It's why I went to West Point to begin with. It's why I ran for U.S. Senate to represent my state. And I'm looking forward to answering the call and doing what I can to walk by faith, not by sight, as you've heard me say many times before. And right now, I'm just putting myself in a position to serve this country.
Well, the reports are that the White House is considering you as a leading candidate for that role. As you mentioned, 37 years old, West Point grad, veteran of the Iraq War. You're also seen by many, and we're told inside the White House, as a rising star in your party. Puts a lot of pressure on you.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the biggest pressure, of course, is raising a family in this country, but also, as 10 years ago, I was deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom. Having those families' weights on my shoulders, deploying and bringing all those aircraft and all those men back home safely. After that, everything else just seems easy.
Yeah,
I'm just putting myself in a position where I can do my best to serve this country. And I'll leave the star, everything. I'm just a servant.
All right.
And I'm looking forward to answering the call should my president ask for my service.
Well, we'll see if that call comes. And I know you and your wife just welcomed a new baby a few days ago. That being said, I got to get to the issues here. Vladimir Putin issuing this warning to the U.S. How would you handle it?
Well, we need to make sure that we're staying strong on Russia. Russia is cheating. There are growing spheres of communist influence. Our president's agenda and making sure that we hold Russia accountable to their promises.
How can relations be improved with Russia, or can they be?
Well, the first thing they need to know, they need to believe, and they need to know in no uncertain circumstances that we mean business. We need to make sure that our allies know that they will always be able to trust and rely on America. And our enemies also need to know that they can trust America's word when we say that we will defend America and we will defend our allies and our interests.
All right.
And I believe that they take our president seriously. And they finally, they need to take a serious look at what they're doing. They can walk this back. All we want is them to abide by the INF Treaty of 1987, for them to destroy the missiles and the battalions and the launchers that are outside of compliance.
Bear with me, because I want to move on to some of the other big issues. So obviously Russia is big. We're also watching North Korea. This summit is happening next week in Vietnam. What are your expectations, and can the president walk away with something from this summit?
Well, I think that we have to be realistic. The first step is we're beginning the dialogue. We're talking this out. We're putting the olive branch out there to begin the process of de-escalating, ending the Korean War. I believe that we should not move from the denuclearization of the peninsula. I believe that having these talks, we need to make sure that we leave there with a set of circumstances where we have verifiable steps to denuclearize the peninsula, and then we work in concert by holding China's feet to the fire to be good actors in forcing North Korea to the table and act in good faith. To make sure that we make the world a safer place by getting North Korea to toe the line as it comes to joining the rest of civilization and denuclearizing. On to the situation, the ongoing situation in Venezuela. The president has just described this as a catastrophe. What do you do? I think that, of course, we need to galvanize the world community, but also understand that the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine already set this standard for making sure that we keep foreign interference out from under our umbrella. I think that by making sure that we continue to give President Guaido the information and support that he needs, continuing to pressure Maduro to step down peacefully, but also making sure that we continue to send aid to take care of the very good Venezuelan people, to address the root cause for strife in Central and South America that's leading to the crisis on our borders, making sure that we address the Northern Triangle and the troika of tyranny that's actually causing strife, and it's actually causing a foothold that communist influence in Russia are continuing to stoke that will lead to forces like ISIS being able to access our shores. We cannot let that happen. We cannot let socialism win. And under President Trump's leadership, it will not. All right, John James, we got to a lot there as the talked about top contender for the UN ambassador role. Come back when you get that phone call. If you get that phone call, we love talking to you. Thanks for coming. Absolutely, thank you. All right.
All right, 9:30 now here in New York. Trey Gowdy challenging recent claims by Andrew McCabe.
If his goal was to obstruct a Russia investigation.
9:33 now, Fox News alert. 2 ISIS brides now trying to return home. First, we had reports of an American woman who traveled to Syria now saying that she's deeply sorry and wants to come home with her 18-month-old son. Meanwhile, in London, the British government revoking the citizenship of this ISIS bride who apparently left London 4 years ago to join the group in Syria. Benjamin Hall watching all of that. He's live in London now with more. Hey, Benjamin.
Well, I came back in the UK. I had my kids. You know, I did have a good time there.
Begum fled the last ISIS-held village of Bahoz some weeks ago into the desert. She now says she just wants to live quietly in the UK and that people should be sympathetic. The UK government see it very differently. Her story mirrors that of Hoda Muthana, the woman from Alabama who also joined ISIS and now wants to go home. The US generally repatriates citizens, then puts them on trial. And indeed, President Trump weighed in recently demanding that European countries take back their citizens who fought in Syria. But European countries say they are a national security threat. They don't want them home. President Trump arguing that they are a bigger threat being held at camps in Syria from where they will surely be released and be able to regroup. Bill?
Thank you, Benjamin. Benjamin Hall with the latest on that.
I listened to Devin and Paul quiz the DOJ and the FBI for hours on multiple occasions about the one counterintelligence investigation. I find it stunning that they would know about a second one and not say a single solitary word. And I will continue to not believe they knew about it unless one or the other contradicts it.
Former Congressman Trey Gowdy there reacting to claims from former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. In an interview yesterday, McCabe said no member of the bipartisan Gang of 8 congressional leaders objected when they learned of a counterintelligence investigation of President Donald Trump. Let's bring in Arizona Republican Congressman Andy Biggs. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee and joins us now. Congressman, good morning to you.
Good morning, Senator.
What do you think about what you're hearing here and the timeline that he is laying out in these now multiple interviews, Andrew McCabe?
Well, the problem that you're always going to have from now on with Andrew McCabe is that he's incredible. He doesn't have veracity. We know he's a liar. He got drummed out of the FBI for that. He's got the lying to Congress issue. We also know he's got some other motivations that are going on here. He wants to rehabilitate himself. He wants to sell books. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And the other thing is, even now what he's saying indicates that he doesn't have this lack of that he has a lack of judgment. So when he starts talking about Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, for instance, being these, they had a personal problem, they had this adulterous relationship, he doesn't even get into the fact of what really was going on, that these two in positions of power were trying to undermine the election of President Trump and delegitimize his presidency once he was elected. And I get back to what Trey was saying yesterday. When Trey said that he was there and heard lots of questions and investigation going on. In the 2 years that I've been involved doing this, I can tell you there was not once that any of us said, well, oh, there was this other investigation. Let's ask questions and let's find out about that. And it's simply because it didn't, as far as we knew, it didn't happen. And so I don't believe a thing Andrew McCabe is saying that Congress said, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Here are more of his own words, Congressman Andrew McCabe.
It was my expectation that it would likely be relayed back to the president, partially because of the presence of Devin Nunes. I mean, his interactions at the White House and the impropriety of the information he exchanged at the White House is well known. So as we began that briefing, as we came into the room, I was concerned about being able to keep that information that we were discussing confidential and close hold. And it is my belief that that information got back to the president.
So you go back to Trey Gowdy's dispute of that claim, and it's nothing in that meeting is supposed to be discussed. I see you shaking your head. Go ahead, Congressman.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, so let's leave his credibility out of it. I mean, for him to say that Devin Nunes was leaking stuff to the White House without any kind of proof or evidence is just outrageous. I have every confidence in Devin that he didn't do that, number one. But number two, when we start looking at this is from a guy who was leaking stuff to the New York Times, who is now kind of throwing Comey under the bus, saying, well, he forgets that he gave me authority to do that. No, Andrew McCabe himself was a leaker. And so I look at it and I said the source of all this stuff is a guy who's just without credibility.
Wrap this up. So what are you calling for here? You're a House Judiciary Committee member. Do you want a second special counsel?
Yeah. Exactly, Sandra. I mean, we've reached a point where so much was going on. You need a second special counsel. Some of us have been asking for quite some time, and we didn't get it. I no longer have confidence that DOJ is going to really lift the lid on this thing and bring this out in the open. But you had people that were trying to get at a sitting president of the United States. And that's simple. We got to get to the bottom of it.
Congressman Andy Biggs, great to have you this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Sandra. Good to be.
20 minutes before the hour, check this out. Baseball's all-star Manny Machado, now a very, very rich man. San Diego Padres signing him to a huge 10-year, $300 million contract. That's a new record for Major League Baseball. You think that's rich? Bryce Harper is still a free agent. He hasn't signed yet, so some experts say he's obviously one of the best hitters in the game.
It's a lot of dough.
You know, we should have played more baseball, right? That's what we should have had our focus growing up. $300 million. Well done. If you can get it, go for it.
Grew up in a big baseball family. We're all looking forward to the season coming up. All right, we'll leave it there. Meanwhile, the Washington Post slapped with a massive...
Showing up for that interview, and we're not sure if he will. Former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis on this. Ed, how you doing? And welcome back to our program here. How do you think the police have handled this so far, Ed?
Thanks, Bill. I'm well. You know, I really believe that Superintendent Johnson and the Chicago Police Department have done precisely sort of in a textbook way handled this this report that did appear rather bizarre on its face. But the police need to support victims. They need to have compassion for people who are making claims like this, especially around issues like racism and homophobia. And so they not only investigated it, they supported the alleged victim, and they knocked down rumors that came out immediately after the report. But then as time went on, their job is to follow the facts. Their job is to determine if these things really did happen. And in a very quick and effective manner, they ran these things to ground. They determined that there were some problems with the story. And then they've got witnesses who are allegedly disputing and talking about a conspiracy here. So this was a textbook case that was handled very well.
Okay, it's
even
not
today,
solved yet, though. It's not solved. Let me just move on to some of this evidence, because you've got that letter out there that apparently some reporting suggested suspicious in this white powder incident. The white powder turned out to be Tylenol. Why do you believe that is Smollett's biggest issue?
Well, the problem with that is that's a federal crime. And so people that use white powder to intimidate or frighten people are violating federal statutes. The FBI is involved in this. They're going to look very closely at this. And these are very strict laws. When the feds get involved in something, there are very specific charges. There are very specific guidelines that they have to use. They're very serious allegations.
Okay, how hard should police push for a second interview in a case like this that's so high profile, Ed?
Well, you have to push and do everything you can to get the individual in to try to clear up some of these discrepancies. But in the final analysis, the lawyers will probably not allow him to come in and talk to the police again. And the next step is a grand jury subpoena.
Wow, when does that happen? What's normally a timetable for something like that?
It depends on if the negotiations are still going on with the lawyers, but when eventually they determine the lawyers are not going to let him come in, the grand jury subpoena will go out very quickly, obviously in concert with the prosecutor's office.
Last question, Ed, about this threatening letter that apparently some people are suggesting that it might have been fabricated. What can we report about that today, Ed?
Well, I think that the key issue in that is the raid of the two brothers' apartment and the retrieval of magazines reportedly having letters cut out of them. That'll be a very simple process of identifying and connecting those to the letters that were sent, and that's pretty solid evidence.
Okay, so if you're an investigator in a case like this and you've got these questions outstanding, what are you doing right now? What's your strategy? Are you laying back? Are you communicating with attorneys on his side? What happens in a case like this?
The prosecutors will handle the communication with the attorneys. You're pushing hard to run down all of these variables. There's, the 6 questions of who, what, when, et cetera, of investigations. They are trying to answer every single one of those questions around the elements of a crime right now to determine whether or not they have a prosecutable case.
All right, Ed Davis, thank you. It's covered basic journalistic standards in its coverage of the viral confrontation, engaging in modern-day McCarthyism, another quote from the lawsuit to advance a biased agenda against the president. Doug McElway picks it up from there. He's been on the story from the beginning. And Doug, good morning.
Morning, Bill. The suit against the Washington Post is the first filed by Atlanta attorney Lynn Wood on behalf of Covington Catholic student Nick Salmon and his parents. Recall the same firm won many settlements against media organizations who falsely accused Richard Jewell of the Atlanta Olympics bombing in 1996. In fact, NBC settled that case for $500,000. Well, yesterday, the law firm sent a signal about who may be next served. Quoting from the suit now, the Post engaged in a modern-day form of McCarthyism by competing with CNN and NBC, among others, to claim leadership of a mainstream and social media mob of bullies which attacked, vilified, and threatened Nicholas Sandmann, an innocent secondary school child. The suit asked for $250 million in compensatory and punitive damages, the same amount that Jeff Bezos paid for the Washington Post. The suit went on to say that Sandmann was bullied by the paper, quote, because he was the white Catholic student wearing a red Make America Great Again souvenir cap. Nicholas is 16 years old, 5'9" in height, and weighs 115 pounds, and has zero history of political activism, it says. The suit adds the Post ignored basic journalist standards because it wanted to advance its well-known and easily documented biased agenda against President Donald J. Trump. In a statement, the Post said, "We are reviewing a copy of the lawsuit and we plan to mount a vigorous defense." Fox News legal analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano says it's really difficult to prove these kinds of cases, especially in regard to compensatory damages, if only because 16-year-olds have not yet demonstrated their earnings. Quote from Judge Napolitano: "It is inconceivable that a 16-year-old's lawyer can prove that the 16-year-old boy lost or will lose $250 million because of the Lincoln Memorial event." Sandman's attorneys say that Nicholas suffered permanent harm to his reputation, emotional distress, and that the Post acted with malice. The suit was filed in Covington, where support for the boys is overwhelming. Bill?
Thank you, Doug. Doug McKelvey, more coming up on that.
President Guaido, the information and support that he needs, continuing to pressure Maduro to step down peacefully, but also making sure that we continue to send aid to take care of the very good Venezuelan people. We cannot let socialism win, and under President Trump's leadership, it will not.
A top contender there for UN Ambassador John James on earlier commenting on the crisis in Venezuela. The military tightening its grip as disputed President Nicolas Maduro rejects offers of much-needed food and aid. A maritime border has been blocked, flights grounded, bridges barricaded. So far, more than 3 million people have fled their homes as conditions there grow more dire by the moment, many emigrating to Colombia. Rich Edson's live at the State Department with much more on this. Rich, the U.S. is massing aid throughout the region now. What is the latest?
The administration, Sandra, good morning, is saying that it is massing aid in Colombia, also at warehouses in Houston and Miami, other portions, to try to get aid into Venezuela. This is all to address that humanitarian crisis, the economic crisis ongoing for years in Venezuela. It is also the administration trying to boost the legitimacy of the opposition leader there, Juan Guaido. Now, contested President Nicolas Maduro is blocking this aid. He claims it's an American attempt to overthrow his government. Opposition leader and interim president Juan Guaido is organizing caravans to bring this aid into Venezuela. That begins on Saturday as he pushes more demonstrations to compel Maduro to yield power.
We're very close to our freedom, and we're lucky that this international effort has been cooperating in this pursuit. You can know that on the 23rd of February, we'll be back on the streets to demand our freedom, and there, peacefully, to achieve freeing Venezuela and do what's needed to put an end to the dictatorship. Now is the time that we must continue making progress. We're very hopeful, and we're very close to achieving our objectives, our goals, and democracy.
In the meantime, tens of thousands of Venezuelans are crossing into Colombia just to get food and medicine. Many of them return to Venezuela that day. Sandra.
And, Rich, as ISIS loses the last of its territory, the State Department wants countries to bring home foreign fighters. What's happening there?
Yeah, and there's this issue of those from other countries who are fighting with ISIS, Americans who are with ISIS in Syria, and the State Department calls that situation. For weeks publicly, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said to countries that have fighters who were captured fighting in Syria, they should bring them back to their countries, try them, and in his words, punish them. Sandra?
Rich Edson at the State Department. Thank you, Rich.
Meanwhile, the mother of a journalist killed.
Who have promoted terrorism need to be held accountable and brought to justice.
So Muthana, who has an 18-month-old son, used Twitter to call for violence against Americans and non-Muslims. She now claims that she had been brainwashed overseas. We'll see where that goes.
On to this story we've been following. Chicago police still waiting to re-interview Jussie Smollett, as new reports claim the Empire actor may have been involved in faking a racist letter sent to him on the set of his own show. Harvey Levin is the founder of TMZ. TMZ broke this story. Harvey, good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning, Harvey.
Thanks, guys.
What can you tell us this morning? What are we learning about this bizarre story?
Well, as to the there are developments on a bunch of fronts, but as to the letter, it is true that the FBI initially, when the letter was received at Fox Studios in Chicago, the FBI looked at it. For some reason, they backed off it once this alleged attack occurred. They are back on it. Now, the one thing that I can't say is that the FBI is now targeting Jesse as the sender of the letter. They are just reopening this investigation.
Okay, Harvey, you broke this story in the very beginning. Why did you believe it?
I didn't say I believed it. What we said was, this is what Jesse said. I never said I believed it. We reported what Jesse said happened. I can tell you that from the beginning, police had suspicions. We knew about the suspicions, but they, on the record, were saying we consider him a victim.
So but when you first went to print with this story online, you had Jesse's version of events.
Right.
Did you run that by police in Chicago before you went online with it?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, they said we consider him a victim of this crime. And they maintained that for almost 2 weeks.
Okay. She mentioned the letter now. What else is suspicious today, or what else is new today?
Well, what's new is it looks like this case may go to the grand jury as early as today. And the brothers who say that they were paid by Jesse to concoct this scheme are going to go before the grand jury. They did not receive immunity. They were not subpoenaed. They're doing it all voluntarily. And they met with prosecutors yesterday, presumably, to go over some of the things that they're going to tell grand jurors. But the focus of the grand jury investigation is whether Jesse should be indicted for a felony, which is filing a false police report.
Right, because right now the Chicago police want to re-interview him. That invitation's been out there for multiple days now, and he's not shown.
Yeah, and we are told that what he needs to do to avert a grand jury is literally a Hail Mary, where somehow he comes up with something that makes the police believe it. It's just not going to happen. And as a matter of fact, I have no doubt Jesse is not going to talk to the police again. I think he's done with that. It just doesn't make any sense given where this is right now. And we're being told by law enforcement the second he refuses to go, it goes immediately to the grand jury.
A couple questions here, Harvey. Did he bring his story to you first? Is that how that began?
No. As a matter of fact, there was a website, an obscure website, that broke this thing vaguely, that there was an attack, and we saw that, and then we started calling various people from his camp, and it took a couple of hours until we finally, got at least his side of this story. But it was a web, and I forgot the name of it now, but it was a website that posted this several hours after the alleged incident happened.
In your business, you cover Hollywood. Did you know about his reputation in Hollywood? Were you a little on the fence at all, given his past history?
Absolutely not, Bill. Jesse is a well-liked person, both on and off the Empire set. There was absolutely, people are stunned. I mean, they're still stunned. They can't make sense of this. But there was absolutely no clue that we had, and that anybody we've talked to throughout this whole thing had, that something like this could go down.
Have you tried to explain to yourself, after that description of this man, why we are where we are today and why this story has taken these bizarre twists and turns?
I mean, look, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to pretend to do that. I think anybody who does is irresponsible. But I will say this, that the brothers have said that Jesse felt that he should have gotten more traction in terms of outrage over that letter that was sent. And again, we don't know who sent it, but felt that there should have been more traction, and that's what the brothers says. They're insinuating strongly, at least, that that was the motivation.
Harvey, just one last question here. When you have watched the developments that have taken hold of the country's imagination over the past week, do you play back any of the events in your own mind as to how you originally reported this, and perhaps maybe a sense of apprehension in the future when stories like these cross?
I would absolutely report that story again, Bill. I'm not even sure I understand your question. Of course I would report that story.
You've got
hold on. You got an actor. Well, no, I mean, you asked the question. You got an actor who says that he was the victim of a homophobic, racist attack. The police say we're treating him as a victim and we're investigating. Why would we not do that story?
Right. Last question. What do you think about the reaction of those who have pulled back some of their initial reaction to the situation in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, there are two ways of looking at this. One is, are you reporting the story? Of course you're reporting the story. I mean, that's not even an issue. But people who made judgments about the story, that I believe it's true, that, you know, all of that, you know, that's where you got a problem, that people jump to conclusions just hearing allegations now. And that's where we are right now in our society. That's a big problem. That is a big problem, and there are a lot of people who did that, and now they're pulling it back. But in terms of reporting it, I'd do exactly that again.
Before we let you go, are you still in communication with, as you referred to, his team? Are you still communicating with them?
Well, we're talking to a lot of people here. And they're not saying a whole lot right now. I don't think they know quite what to do. It looks to me like Mark Garagos may be representing him. We can't get to the bottom of it, but there are certainly rumblings of that. So, yeah, we're trying to get information, but it's sparse on his side.
Mark Garagos, the well-known attorney out of L.A. Harvey, thank you for your time. You're saying grand jury today. We'll see if that's the case in Chicago. Thank you, sir.
Maybe today.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Harvey Levin from TMZ.
Thanks, Harvey.
Thank you, sir. 15 past the hour now. Let's move on. Another day, another interview with the fired acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe.
FBI people will continue to do their jobs under any circumstances, in the face of any sort of obstacles. When the president and his supporters continually perpetuate this false narrative of corruption within the FBI, that makes their job harder every day.
Top Republican lawmakers, a lot of reaction firing back at those claims and the credibility. So more on that coming up. As
anxious to see where Director Mueller concludes that.
So that Andrew McCabe interview from last night on CNN, standing by his decision to investigate the president, former acting FBI director, making the rounds in a big way on the talk shows, promoting his new book. Want to bring in our headliner today, Bill Bennett, former Secretary of Education and host of Wise Guys on Fox Nation. How you doing?
I'm all right.
We're keeping you busy, aren't we?
Yeah.
So interview after interview is MSNBC this morning, NBC yesterday, CNN last night, 60 Minutes Sunday night. You've seen it all. You've watched it all. What do you think we're learning from him?
Well, interesting. Well, we're learning a lot about our culture, aren't we, in the country and the division. Media tour for a guy who, you know, the Inspector General of the Justice Department said lied and should be fired and should not be given his pay. But he's out on a book tour. Other people who've lied are going to prison maybe for life, but they're associated with Donald Trump as opposed to being opposed to Donald Trump. That's the biggest picture I see. The other thing is, you know, how do you believe him? What do you believe of what he is saying? If I believe him, then I have more questions. I noticed that interesting piece that came up after the 60 Minutes where he talked about, oh, well, I reported this to the Gang of Eight. What did you report to the Gang of Eight? If he reported to the Gang of Eight, you know, McConnell and Ryan and all that, that there was an investigation, a counterintelligence investigation, which is what this is about Russia, why would anybody have any objection? My question is, did you mention you were looking at the 25th Amendment and talking to cabinet members? I doubt that he did that.
I mean, it's fascinating to watch this all unfold. He's really putting himself out there, multiple interviews. He's saying a lot. Some of it contradicts. He's contradicting himself, the timelines that have been laid out. What do you think needs to happen here?
In Washington, the thing I learned after being there many years, I guess I'm still there, I'm part of the swamp, I guess, you know, but is you're either on offense or you're on defense. So he's on offense, and he's being caught in all sorts of lies. But he's got to set himself up as best he can, because in April, the same Mr. Horowitz is coming out with another report, which I think will be very damning. And their investigations.
That's the Inspector General.
The Inspector General of the department, correct, yeah.
Let's go to The View from yesterday, all right?
Yeah.
Here's the exchange from Meghan.
I don't watch it, but let's see it.
Here we go.
Were you ever a leaker to the New York Times?
Absolutely not. No, not in any time ever. You should understand, Meghan, when I was serving as deputy director, I was one of 2 people in the FBI that had the authority to disclose information to the media. That is an FBI policy. It's baked into the way that we run media relations in the organization. So I transacted on issues regarding the media every single day.
Just take her question on its face. Why is that question so important?
Well, first of all, if he's leaking to the New York Times, that's interesting for an FBI acting director or deputy director to be doing. Second, it contradicts James Comey. And so he has to deal with that. So, you know, there's an old thing in philosophy. Excuse me, I'm trained as a philosophy professor. The Theban liar, you know, this guy's known to be a liar, and you go to the crossroads, well-educated woman nodding here, see? And he always lies, or he lies half the time. And you say, which way do we go? That way. Now, which liar do you believe here? It's hard to know, but I think it will be unpacked. I'm hoping Lindsey Graham gets to the bottom of it, but I think this guy Horowitz and maybe the courts will get into this.
Let's unpack the Covington situation.
Yes.
Get your thoughts on that this morning. The latest tweet from the president coming out. The Washington Post, and this is quoting Nick Salmon and his lawyer, suing the Washington Post. The Washington Post ignored basic journalistic standards because it wanted to advance its well-known and easily documented biased agenda against President Donald J. Trump. Covington student suing Washington Post. The president writes, "Go get them, Nick. Fake news."
Yeah, I agree with the president here, and I'm glad they got a good lawyer. Lynn Wood's a great lawyer.
On the program tomorrow, by the way.
Good for you.
Lynn Wood represented Richard Jewell when he was falsely accused of the Atlanta Olympic bombing in 1996.
The big question, I've been listening to lawyers and people commenting saying there's not much of a case here. There's got to be a case here. There ought to be a case here. We live in a time where, what is it, a competition to see how quickly you can destroy someone and how quickly you can destroy someone with a falsehood. I mean, this is unbelievable, this rush to judgment, this rush to condemnation. These boys, and that will be tagging these boys forever, no matter what happens in this lawsuit. Shameful. It tells you something about where the country is and where a lot of the media is. I don't think apologies do it.
He's not just going after the Washington Post, though.
Oh, he's going after everybody.
A line of individuals, actually. And this is a new approach.
Yeah, no, we'll see. But look, given the state of the social media and given what we have seen, something has to be done. I mean, I think that's what citizens, non-lawyers like myself say. You cannot just have this system where you rush to judgment, destroy somebody, and then pick up the pieces later. You got to have some accountability.
There's a massive lesson in this, isn't there?
Yeah, massive.
Not just a massive lawsuit.
No,
but a real lesson in how people react.
It's a big lesson in civics and withholding judgment and the burden of proof.
How about
remember the whole business with Kavanaugh? Can we see where the proof is before we make a judgment?
How about a lesson in economics? Because we are looking at a trend in this country that is almost hard to believe. If you throw up some of these full screens here, we're looking at some Fox News polling on the favorability of socialism among the millennial generation, and it is rising.
Yeah. Well, I give you the American educational system. I'm sorry to say, I've worked in it for 40, 50 years now. People think our math and reading scores are bad. They are internationally. But you know what our worst subject is? American history. I love the quote, "In the long story of inhumanity and misery that is history, the American achievement is high and unique." Our kids are not taught that. They are not taught that in high school. They're not taught that in middle school. They're not even taught that in elementary school. College professors now tell me, some of my liberal professor friends, when they come, you know, I say, "You probably were taught America's such a great place." Kids go, "Nope, never heard that. I was taught it was imperialist, colonialist, racist." We got to get on this. You know, I sometimes oversimplify and say our problem goes back to the schools, but Plato said, excuse the quote, "The most important question in society is who gets to teach the children and what do they teach them?" And I think that's right.
You're full of philosophy today.
Full of what?
Philosophy. It's all right. Similar poll among millennials about capitalism. We show you what's happening here.
Some good news here, actually.
Yeah. You know, 57% favorable for all people, 49% for millennials. That's got to give you some hope.
Gives me some hope, but that's an aging demographic there. You know, I got.
So let me ask you this: so when Bernie Sanders comes out and he has his rally, he raised $4 million in 12 hours.
Yeah.
Don't think he's not formidable at the age of 77.
He is.
What is the attraction for someone under the age of 30?
Well, I don't know what the attraction is, but he was like Father Abraham, I thought the other day. I'll speak favorably. He said, "Well, they've all learned from me. They've all learned from me." I think I got a fairly good Bernie accent. I come from the same part of Brooklyn. You know, they're all saying what I'm saying. and let them run with that lesson in 2020. It is amazing to me how far left, how fast that party has moved left, and I don't see them coming back to the middle.
What are the implications of that for 2020, do you think?
I think it's very good for Donald Trump because I think people can say, well, maybe we need to temper capitalism with more charity, with more understanding. Maybe we need to increase our giving. Maybe we need to look at alternative fuels. But when you go to the Green New Deal, no more fossil fuels, I think the American people are going to get off. But the way these political movements work, you know, the first candidate, Democrat candidate, gets up and says this, and they've already said it, and gets a standing ovation, the rest will go.
Yep. Rhonda McDaniel was on last hour. Last comment on this, and thank you for coming in today.
You betcha.
She said it's going to be a long, drawn-out primary in the Democratic side. I think she's probably right about that. In fact, the way I see it today, and go ahead and give me your analysis, I think they're in the same situation they were 2 years ago. The establishment will want a center-left candidate like Hillary Clinton, but the progressives are going to vote far left during the primary contest. My sense is they'll do the same thing in 2020, which then draws out the process. The establishment will look for somebody like Joe Biden, but they may get a fill in the blank.
Well, first of all, if they do one-on-one debates, we will go into 2022 before there's an election, because there's about 46 of them, as best I can tell. So the sorting out is amazing. But look where the energy is, and look where the passion is. And the energy and the passion is on the left. It's at AOC and the others. And, you know, they really need to remember that this is still a centrist country.